Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel in this Encounters with Inspiring and Beautiful Minds, and I have one right here with me. Please think of liking and subscribing so that you too can become part of this process of spreading powerful and efficient ideas and tools. And also, if you're interested in spreading your message out here, please write me and let's create this network of meaningful conversations and learn more about how to use this mind, how to use this body. And today, my guest is for the third time, Harbers, NLP Master Practitioner. Welcome back.
Thank you, Susanna. It's good to be back. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you again. And honestly, we have seen each other quite a lot this past few weeks. And last time when we met, we agreed to have this third part of the interview and talk about your program, Quantum Healing, right? But only after having been initiated by you in this practice. And here I am, a few good weeks and a few difficult events later.
Yes.
So I want to use this opportunity again to thank you for this experience. And I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about it, but I want to talk more about you and your program today. But the truth is that while Dick was introducing me to these 4 steps of this first part of the quantum healing, life pushed me through some challenges. Among which some health issues in the family and a complex suicide story. And I think through what we've done, we went deeper than it was meant to be. What do you think?
Well, deeper than we normally go in this process. That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. So without going into the details of what and how for now, this is very briefly and quickly what I want to share with you and our viewers here. So the pain that we experience during these challenges is real. So that was one thing that I understood. It is physical, it is biochemical, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain, it doesn't matter. When it happens, it's real.
The body feels
that's the bad news.
Also tells us we're alive.
Yes. Also part of the bad news is that every other experience that I had around that pain, because of course when you experience that pain, you don't want that pain. You want that pain to go away. You want to run away. You want to kill it. You want to destroy it. So all these reactions that we may have around these painful experiences are also real as they happen and as they come up in the instant. Then the part of the good news is that there is something extremely intelligent in our minds, which we call it sometimes the unconscious or superconscious. In yoga, we call it buddhi. Generally, we call it consciousness. But there is something in there that can process everything that happens. Process in the sense of digesting, integrating, and literally going through and coming out the other side, because that's what matters. Another point that I wanted to bring is that everything is a process or pattern, and every single life experience can be processed. That's my confirmation out of this experience that I've had with you, Dick. And lastly, this is the most important message actually that I want to deliver to our audience today, that behind every single painful experience, there is a blue sky. And if I get emotional now, it's just because of the power that is hidden in these words and the truth that is hidden in these words. It's not because it's not over. It's over for me. But that that moment that we all wait unconsciously for, because we all wait for this somehow. I think you agree with me on that one. Now that I know you a bit more, Dick, I think you will agree with me on that one, that we all wait for this breakthrough moment.
Yes.
Unconsciously, we all wait for this moment when things will be different, when it will be lighter, it will be better. But since we don't have the right tools, we think that that moment will be when we have that new relationship, when we have that new car, when we have that new job, and then we have that. So we are always hoping deeply for that breakthrough, for that moment when things will get better. And the experience that I had with you proved to me that this moment is real and it has nothing to do with what happens outside. It is on how you process inside. And that without the proper support and guidance, this processing can take much longer and provoke much more damage and even add more pain and make the bubble even bigger and larger and more difficult to tackle. But generally speaking, every single experience can be integrated, processed, and we can come out of each of them more empowered and with more resources. And this is not empty talk. And you know that I'm telling the truth here. You are my witness.
Yes.
So yeah, this is what I wanted to share with our audience today. And I hope that they will take this in and allow this to shift something in their perception and just at least be more curious about what else is possible. How else can I deal with life? What else can I do? What tools can I use in order to get this? This is my cat joining the conversation. She's part of this. In order to bring myself to another level of human experience. To me, this is what it is about. It's not about that purpose. It's not about what you're supposed to do in life or what's the meaning of life. It's simply the process of evolution itself. Growing more and more and more. And of course, you know, we all agree on that, and NLP is stating it, that we are designed, our nervous system is designed to grow and to expand continuously. We are continuously searching for more and more because there's so much more potential in there than we can imagine. So I leave you with that. I mean, I don't want to take too much time because I could talk a lot about what happened, but I want to talk about your quantum healing that I was part of. And I don't know if you want to comment on what I just said, or we go ahead with the questions. It's up to you.
Well, the process you went through was very deep and very painful, not of your own making. And there would be people that would call a similar sort of event for themselves, and currently medically that a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, if you stayed in it, right? And as life would have it, and as maybe the universe would have it, we happened to meet, get to know each other a bit through that previous 2 interviews. And then you wanted to talk a bit more about my work, and I said, well, it might be a good idea that we take you through the process and you can experience the work, and then you can interview me from having had the experience, because it's an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process. Though the mind is involved, like it's an intellectual, experiential process at the same time. And as it would happen, this particular event that was difficult for you happened right in the middle of the process. What prevents people in, let's say, a grieving process or some other emotional process or even some physical healing processes happening quickly or easily is because they don't have the resources to do that. The internal resources are not fully available to them. It's not that they're not there, it's just they haven't accessed them. And since your process, I've taken more people through the quantum various stages, and each person in their own way is just amazed at how easily it is to access these resources that we've never given any conscious thought to in the past.
Yeah, so let's get to explain a little bit more about this for people that are listening now and never seen or never heard of NLP or quantum healing, or maybe didn't even see part 1 or 2 of this interview. Can you please describe quickly what do you mean by this quantum healing, and what are these resources that you're talking about?
Like the first one that came to me, and I'll explain a bit how this evolved over time, because I started playing with NLP as I learned it. And I was amazed at how easily, if you use words in a certain way, people, and in fact people sort of pay attention to themselves inside, they start discovering things if you ask the right sort of questions. As part of my NLP exploration with people, one person came to me one time with a bit of a physical issue, and I'd come to recognize that the body has a natural healing process. And so I thought, I wonder if I can ask the inner healer to heal this physiological thing. Just had a concept of an inner healer. And we know from science that if you mentally think or have an emotional part of your thinking, your physical cells respond to that inside your body. They respond to it when they're no longer in your body. So your physiology responds very clearly to your thoughts. So I just got a person to ask the inner healer if it could heal this physical thing. And the answer came back yes, in a thought in their mind. So I said, well, would you mind organising the healing to happen as quickly as possible? The inner healer said, fine. I said, how long will it take? They said, 2 days. Thank you very much. Lady came back 2 days later, said, all the symptoms were gone. So that was the first resource that I became aware of. It was just such a simple thing, but it comes from an NLP concept called reframing, which is, I won't go into details of that, but basically where you learn to negotiate with parts of yourself in a thought processes. Some people would call them other personalities, but they're not other personalities, they're part of who we are. But they all have consciousness, all awareness, because our whole system is conscious.
So this inner healer, this very first experience that you had, this first idea or first resource you had. So let's clarify what is this, what are resources actually? The inner programs, inner representation, how would you define them?
Well, they're dynamic structures is probably the best word. Made of
dynamic structures.
Like as human beings, we can only experience life through our 5 senses. Some would call a 6th sense, maybe, but the 5 physiological senses. And every human behavior, whether it's a thought, whether it's an emotion, whether it's these resources I'm talking about, they're all made a dynamic system where within that dynamic mental process, there's three parts to it. There's a visual component, an internal image or colour, which we're not always aware of, but it's there. An internal dialogue or sound, and a physiological sensation. So an emotion, most people are aware of the physiological sensation and perhaps the internal dialogue bit, where they're talking to themselves about how bad it is and how painful it is and stuff like that. Yeah. But when you can help them access the visual component, because you can't change the bit you're aware of, because that, if you would, you would. You don't want to stay in pain. You say, I don't want to feel the pain, but unless you're very willpowered, you cannot easily stop the pain. Or the internal dialogue, for some people find it very hard to stop that. But as soon as you get into the visual, it's almost like they disassociate from the pain automatically because they're going to a visual realm. And the visual, when you enable that visual image or colour or whatever the visual is made up of to change its qualities, it's how it's experienced, the physiology follows. And it changes its feeling. And the internal dialogue follows and changes its quality. So the whole dynamic structure changes. So the resources are also made of visuals.
So put into different words, we all have these capacities. And basically what we're doing is using NLP and this type of work that you're doing is using the internal representation of these capacities in order to access them and use them intelligently, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We're using the NLP skills and all the techniques that NLP discovered, how to do all this, to actually then use those skills to enable us to take our attention inwards, to pay attention to our internal thoughts and processes and physiological responses. Yeah. And then we can actually start a dialogue with them.
So we have capacities in order to access or to awaken that capacity in me. I need to know what's the internal representation in order to start a communication with it and to start a dialogue. That's what the resource would be, to put it, in a bit
yes. If you want to do it for yourself, that's true. But I've worked with people where they weren't in a position in their own way to do that consciously, so I can actually speak to them on their behalf.
No, absolutely.
Have the same results.
Absolutely. No, I didn't mean that you have to do that, or of course you can do it by yourself, but it's a process. We need to find out the facilitator, as you call it. The facilitator will enable you to identify what is the inner representation of that particular capacity. And basically we can come up with any type of resource. Is that it? How many do you have that you're working with in the first?
Well, in the quantum healing, we do 7 resources.
7 resources.
As a starting package. Yeah. There are many, many more, but that's usually sufficient.
How come you chose those?
Broken up, sorry. Well, because the process of quantum healing evolved over time. I didn't start off as a completed concept in my mind. And as I was working with people, I sort of discovered, if you like, somehow the inner healer. And then I was starting working with people with inner healer when appropriate with different clients. And then one time I asked the inner healer if it would heal this issue, and the inner healer said no. I thought, that's interesting. I didn't say I didn't want to, it said it couldn't. So I said, well, what do you need to be able to help heal whatever's going on? And the inner healer said, I need some nurturing. The inner healer wasn't fully healthy in its own way for whatever reason. And the trick with all this work is that you don't judge any of the answers. You just accept the answer and then work it out in your mind what question would enable you and the part you're negotiating with to come up with a way to make it possible for it to happen. And it came up, I need the inner healer. And once we got, and then we did the same thing. I just asked the inner healer to come to the person's awareness in a particular way. And there it was, and it had healed the inner nurture, self-nurture. The self-nurture was quite happy to give its energy to the inner healer. The inner healer felt much better and often went and healed the thing. So that was a second resource. And so over time, when the existing resources that we were working with couldn't do whatever they needed to do, like one time with the inner heal and the self-nurture, they said, well, we can't do the healing and we can't do it. And I said, why not? Because we don't know how. I thought, well, what would you need to, you'd need to have the knowledge. What has the knowledge? I said, would the intuition help? They said, that'd be great. So the third resource with the intuition. So over months, it was about 4 months between each new resource. So I got 4 months of practicing with clients until another resource was required. And so every 4 months, so about 2 years it took for all the resources to come together. And then something said, that's enough for now. That's enough for this process. Because otherwise you can build up a package of resources that take you 4 years to work with, you know. Because each one of them takes time to get to access, right?
Yes.
So it had to be a manageable process in this physical limitation of this time frame that we live on this planet.
Yes.
A sensible sort of thing. And so since that time, for years, like 30 plus years, that's 7 resources. Occasionally another one is required, but just for that person. And so you go with the person's needs. You don't go with this is the map, it's always got to be these 7. Because NLP says, you know, the map is not the territory. So the quantum healing is like a map that I use. But if the territory says it needs something different, you go with the territory always, of course. And just recently, though, I've realized that the conscious mind is also a resource. So lately, and what this is reflecting in quite different results. I've invited the conscious mind at the end of the resource process. I've invited the conscious mind to integrate with the resources. So it's constantly in contact with them. Not always that you're constantly aware of it, like you've got other things distracting you, doing this and that and the other, but every now and then something, and the conscious mind says, oh, that's it, thank you very much, and it goes on with what it's doing. And I've noticed with the current, like I've been on working with people now since the pandemic here, because it's locked down in the Philippines, and the quality of the outcomes are dramatically different because the conscious mind is more involved. Now that's a fascinating thing because in the past I was that person's conscious mind for them, doing it for them with my skills and facilitation processes. But I'm noticing these people, once the conscious mind is involved, they're starting to do more and more of it for themselves more quickly. The other interesting thing is that one person came to me recently who had so much negative internal dialogue and she wanted to deal with that.
Yes.
And as we're going through the resources, each resource had its own internal dialogue. And then I said, well, internal dialogue's a resource too. And suddenly the internal dialogue stopped.
Yes.
Because it's being paid attention. It stopped, not to stop being present. It stopped chattering because it was being paid attention to. Because internal dialogue can only signal through internal dialogue. That's the only mechanism it has.
Absolutely.
Every resource has its own, every system has its own messaging system.
Yeah.
And this woman was fascinated because all this time until now, until this moment she was with me, she'd been fighting her internal dialogue.
Yeah.
And she said, I haven't smiled so much for so long
for our viewers. Just wanted to mention the fact that actually what we're talking about now, Dick, is that is the first session that we do in this quantum healing one. The first session is this process through which we identify all these inner resources and we work with them. So this is my experience. My experience was quite pleasant, and just to share a little bit so people have an idea what we're talking about. For me, the inner healer, from what I remember, was this like a source of light that was coming out from my chest, like source of rays of light. They were going everywhere, and the way I'm using it now, whenever I feel that my body would need some healing or there is something going on in the body, I would connect mentally with that image and I would allow it and ask it kindly if it could do that for me. The inner nurturer, if I remember correctly, was this bubble, like an eggshell, an egg shape form. There was like a protective shield around me. And when the inner knower or the intuition was my third eye. So again, some sort of vision that was represented as a source of light and knowledge. And so the experience was very interesting because you are surprised at how easily, for me anyway, that was my experience, how easily I could get to these images and how those resources are just a few questions away. I think this is amazing. I mean, this is the discovery of the century. This NLP is fantastic for that. Everything that we need is just a couple of questions away.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing is, not everybody represents in the same way.
Absolutely.
Everyone is different.
Yes.
Right? Everyone is different. One person, her first resource, the inner healer, came up as a image of her grandmother. And then she was concerned that all the other resources, though she didn't know what they were yet, would also be of her grandmother. I said, well, if they are, they'll be slightly different. Like emojis are all different, but they're all faces with eyes and mouths and noses. Right? They'll have a different representation somehow. But of course, as it turned out, each resource was totally different. And some are physical sensations for some people. And one person had all the resources together, and to the very end, there was a beautiful, almost like a non-physical concert, musical, almost like a sound of angels singing, for want of a better word. Right? Like it wasn't a normal human sort of singing, but it was this beautiful, melodic, harmonious sound tones going on. So it can come in any sensory system. Now, some people are more visual, some people are more sensory, in a kinesthetic or bodily sense, and some people, the tonalities of the words are probably less often, but the most common are the visuals and the feelings. But it actually doesn't matter which way it comes.
So it all comes down then to this curiosity and this ability to be present. So what I can say from the other side, as being the person that you worked with, is that what helped is your ability to wait and be present with what happens without having any judgment or without pushing in any way, in any direction. Really allowing that and totally and fully trusting that the person has all the resources. So that is one of the presuppositions of NLP, that everybody has all the resources that they need in order to deal with whatever happens.
That's right.
And as an NLP practitioner myself, and for those listening, either as clients or as NLP practitioners, this is essential. Really holding on to this idea and really believing and acting upon this thought that the person in front of you has that capacity, having no doubt, because this, I think, enables the other person, the person that you have in front of you, to go through this experience by themselves while feeling supported. That's all you need, a presence.
And yet, of course, the interesting thing is, like with yourself and other people who've gone through the process, once they go through the process, they from that process become experientially convinced they have these resources, right? And after the Quantum One process, which we'll maybe talk about later, you learn how to access any other resource you want. So it's not just limited to the 7, but for the purpose of the Quantum One program, we have the 7 resources plus now the conscious mind.
Yeah.
That's 8.
So let's go back to the process itself. So quantum healing, first part, There are 4 meetings, right, that you're doing with your clients?
Well, it's been upgraded to 5 now, because
5.
weren't doing
All right.
justice to the tail end of the process. But yes,
All
5
right.
sessions of
5
about 1
sessions,
hour each. Yeah,
1 hour each. And the first session is establishing these resources
correct.
and
That's right.
also
That's right.
allowing them to correlate and to work together, right?
To integrate and harmonize with each other and work together.
With
That's
each other,
correct. Yeah.
integrate and harmonize with each other. That's great. How about the other 4?
Because well, before we go there, it's important that they actually work together, because when they start working together, it becomes a synergy, and the energy increases. They empower each other as well, because sometimes resources themselves have been damaged for historical reasons. In fact, I
What
had
do you
one
mean by that?
person, one of their
Resources can be
resources.
damaged.
Well, again, you work with a client. I had one client in the last few weeks where I think it was a self-nurture, was in a hospital on a deathbed. The self-nurture, not the person. So that self-nurture, for whatever reason, historically as a child or something else, she wasn't looking after herself, right?
I see.
So then the inner healer started healing the self-nurture, and that self-nurture took about 3 weeks to come to full health. And fascinatingly, in her life, she started sleeping more. She started looking after herself more as a self-nurturer came back into well-being. So it's so important that the resources actually start working with each other as well. And there have been cases in the past as well where the resources themselves, for whatever reasons, have been damaged or hurt, not working fully. Right? So yes, we have all the resources available, but they're not always in a healthy state, often because people have ignored them or made them wrong or judged them. Because some people are very protective because of childhood situations, so their self-protective gets so strong they can't allow themselves to be intimate with people. And then they get annoyed with that, and they get really annoyed with their self-protector because they can't have intimacy. Or, they might have physical intimacy, but they don't allow themselves emotional intimacy. And then when you go and work with those people, the self-protector's been working so hard, it's very tired, and finally it almost becomes an emotional thing that the self-protector is actually validated and then invited to join all the other resources, so that it can actually, with the intuition, it can use its protective energies in just the right way, at just the right times, not all the time. Right? Which is where they were living. They were living in an all-the-time protection mode. And so, that's another resource, the self-protector. So yes, the integration and working together resources is a critical part of the process, as well as discovering them or bringing them out or eliciting them, bringing them together.
But normally, once you do this, once the unconscious mind does that for the person, it becomes an automatic process, is it? Or we still have to go back to it for a while?
No. Well, it's automatic. It stays automatic unless you start judging it. But by the time you've been through the process, you stop judging it. Right? And then it will continue working, doing its thing. And your conscious mind will pay attention more and more and notice it's happening.
Session number one, identifying these resources, making them work together. What will be the next step?
Well, the next step is we have to make sure that the physiology of the body can process it effectively. And the fastest processing mechanism that I've discovered, there may be faster ones. I don't have all the answers yet. We're still learning. We're such a complex system. But the fastest processing that I know about is called rapid eye movement processing.
Rapid eye movement.
Right? Because when REM, rapid eye movement processing, and we normally do that at night while we're sleeping and dreaming for about up to 2 hours, roughly. But there's been some research that suggests that we actually need more than 2 hours per 24 hours to process everything that we hear and see and do. Everything that we experience has to be processed. So some issues people are dealing with is unprocessed stuff, that's all. So then I discovered, okay, well, if REM's so important, and why is REM important? Well, NLP discovered, quite interestingly, that when you think, your eyes look up to get information. Different eye sectors. And NLP discovered that the direction the eyes move has meaning. In fact, everything has meaning in the NLP world. So they discovered that the different eye sectors eyes go to have certain meaning in the accessing of information. visual information, auditory information, kinesthetic bodily feelings, and internal dialogue and smells and tastes. So the REM then is the eyes going to all these types of information as it's processing. It's going to memories and possibilities and internal dialogue and feelings. So the REM is processing all those types of ways we've experienced the world and putting it together and filing it away. And usually, some is archives because it's no longer relevant, and some is put into memory and whatever it is. And NLP teaches you how to map people's eye movements to check if it's actually if their map is accurate. And it turns out that their map is what's called an optimally or normally organized eye map, which is different for right-handed people and reversed for left-handed people, mostly, but not always. And so I started in a little more detail, asking a few more questions to map the eye movements a little bit more thoroughly. And I discovered that many people's eye maps are not normally organized. And when I map their eyes and I say, do you sometimes have this sort of experience? They say, yes, when I sort of work out what might be going on because of the organization of their eye map. Oh, that's interesting. So the system isn't processing as effectively as it could be, because it is processing. They're still living, they're still talking, they're still eating, they're still dreaming. But they're also not having a particularly functional life. Something's not quite right. Now, it's not a mental illness in one sense, nor is it necessarily, nor is it inherently bad or good in a judgmental sense. It's just not working as effectively as it could be. It's like the computer is glitched up a bit, right? So it needs a reboot or something like that. Because at the bottom line, it's almost like a computer's made of meat, right? So it's got a certain operating system. It's all got to be worked out. The eyes need to be able to move smoothly through the eye map to go to all those sectors of it, wherever they need to go to get information during the REM process, very, very quickly, very, very quickly. And sometimes it's so fast. And if the eyes jump through certain sectors and miss certain sectors, then that means the eyes can't process smoothly either. So there's two things. The sectors are not well arranged, and the movements of the eyes are not smooth and easy and effective. So the second session is about sorting all that out. And that takes an hour again, about an hour. Yeah. Now, to be honest with you, some sessions go over time, and that's all part of the process. That doesn't matter. We make sure the process is finished.
And how do you know it's finished?
Well, I decide it's finished. Well, with the resources, you have all the resources done. Now, the thing is, if it's like I go through all the different stages of the process that are on my map, that doesn't mean the person is finished. So I invite the whole system to continue processing that between our session and the next week when we meet. So we'll keep continuing. And I ask it to happen gently in the background while they do their normal daily activities, and more thoroughly and deeply while they're sleeping and dreaming.
That's why you usually when we
a week between. So that's the second session.
Yeah, that's the part that I can testify less about, because actually the events in my life happened between the second and the third. So I couldn't actually say how it was. So the working with the REM is the least clear for me, but it doesn't matter because I know it's done unconsciously, but that's why I'm asking all these questions. So let's move to step number 3. What's the third session about?
Well, the third session is the timeline. And NLP, maybe not the first people to discover timelines, but probably the first ones that sort of coherently and put it together in some sort of sensible way of understanding it and eliciting it, discovering them, right? So in other words, we elicit these things from inside ourselves. They're already there. It's not like we force them on anybody else and on anybody. And so we explore the timelines. Now, there's 3 components to the timelines that are important. And one is the past. And some issues we have in our lives are to do with past stuff, our childhood or parents or society or culture, doesn't matter. And then there's a future. And we're all planning for the future, or think what we could do tomorrow or next week, or how we would like this project to go, or things like that. And then the bit that NLP doesn't explore in as much thoroughness is the present moment. And we have a present moment. And it turns out that the present moment is a very fascinating place, because that's where we're living all the time. And so many people have so much stuff in their present moment that they're on overload. And some of that stuff should be in the past or in the future. It shouldn't be in the present moment at all, except when you want to pay attention to it. Right? So when we work with the present moment and the timelines, we get all that organized, because some people's timelines are so disorganized. They don't know that. But when you listen to people talking, their language will give you a clue. Like one lady came to me and she wanted to do some work and she said, I just feel like I'm going around in circles. And the timelines were wrapped around the body, which is not very functional. Another person said, oh, I feel like I'm in a real fog all the time. And the timelines were like candy floss all around her head. And she was in a fog of, candy floss, or what is it called? Fairy floss, sugar candy, all that sort of stuff. The fluffy stuff like. It's all around her head. So she's living in this fog, all her past and future all interact, and she couldn't think clearly at all. So to untangle fairy floss is a fascinating process. It takes a bit of time to do all that, all the strands of it. Right?
Yeah, and in a few words, how do you untangle that? How do you clarify the present moment?
Well, I don't have to worry about it. Their intuition knows how to do it already.
All right.
And so I just invite their system to start untangling it, and I give them some suggestions of where it might be best to go, depending on whether they're right-handed or left-handed. And I say, now, it can always go back to where you've had it, because you know that. But when we've finished, let's just move it for the purpose of this exercise. And then at the end, if you want to put it back, that's fine, because it's your life and it's your way of having it. And there are particular orientations of timelines that are more optimal, more functional than other timelines. And you can move them around once you know about them to different orientations for different purposes. That's also true, once you know about them. But for my work, I offer what I consider to be the most optimal orientation, and ensure that the present moment can become clear. So all the junk, all the clutter, all the stuff that wasn't processed, even if it's not yet processed, can go in the future for later processing, or go back in the past where it comes from. And suddenly people have this present moment that's clear.
Yeah.
And silent.
I can testify on that one. That was one of the most pleasant moments in my work with you. Of course, everything else, but because of all the pain, I experienced the pleasurable moments after the sessions. But doing the timeline work was one of the best experiences, because you literally feel in the moment, you feel that clarity. Remember, my past was wrapped around my body. When you asked me where's the past touching my body, I showed you like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the one.
Actually, when you rearrange it, you're actually unwrapping it.
Yeah, exactly.
Physiologically, moving your arms to help unwrap it.
Yes.
Now, not everybody does it physiologically like that. And I was watching you, and this is great. It's all happening. So the thing is, you and your system automatically did that without. I mean, you're conscious and you watched it and noticed it and all that, but you sort of started doing this, right?
Yes.
Like it was like a dance of the arms.
Yes, I took it like this, and I just threw it to the past where it belonged. Let's move to the next step. What comes after the timeline work?
What comes up in the timeline work? Well, it varies a lot. For some people, it's just experience it as finally being organized. Right? And it has relevance to the IMAP as well, because the past needs to be where the recall side is, mostly. There's no point looking in the past where the recall is the memory. So the timelines are integrated with the IMAP. So it's all a staged process. Each bit builds on the previous bits and links into them, and all that integrates with the system. For some people, it's just the fact it's organized. For some people, it's just the fact that at last they've got a personal space. That's their private space. It includes that the present moment is also their personal space. And I go through a process where I invite them to consider what color it might be, or what shape it might be, just to explore what comes up. There's no right or wrong in any of that. But I discovered that one person had a sense that her personal space, private present moment, what we're going to call it, was the color of maroon. And so I said, well, what's it like if it's blue? And I went through the various colors. And she said, I said, I think I have this color. I think I have a sky blue. And she realised she'd been walking around her life with the present moment colour that was not comfortable. And just changing the colour changed her feeling of peace. But at the same time, so what colour might it be if you're angry? And so it's probably red, or whatever colour is anger for them. Everybody's got a different colour for emotions. But we go through different emotions, and they all come up with different colours for the different emotions. And so my guess is that, and I don't see auras, but my guess is that the present moment in some way changes colour with our emotions. And people who are very visually, have high visual acuity at some level of perception that I don't have, they would see those colours emanating from people that you could call the aura, right? Because the concept of the aura must come from some experience of some people somewhere, right? Otherwise we wouldn't even think of it, right? And occasionally I'll get a sense of an aura when I'm working with people. Because when you're working with people, you go into sort of an altered state a bit. You get into the zone mentally, and you can stay focused for a long time. I mean, these processes can take up to 2 hours sometimes, and I'm right there with them for the whole 2 hours, as you would know. And so to do that, you've got to stay really focused with the other person, at the same time monitoring your own state. So you're not putting onto other people your stuff. That's also important as a facilitator. So for some people, it's having that personal space. Some people, stuff will come up from past or future stuff. That's also true. That's occasionally that needs to happen. Then you've got the resources to deal with it. Some inner child needs healing. You've got the inner healer. Or some people might say, "Oh, look, I've got all these things on my mind. Well, just put them in the future. Let them sort themselves out in the future. Not come up one at a time when they're ready." So we start with resources, whereas many NLP processes, people come with an issue and they try and find a resource to fix it. And you can do that. I mean, it's not that it works. But to me, it's much more helpful to start with a pretty solid package of resources to start with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like this, you're safe, and you know that the process will be much faster and probably much easier. And it will happen more in the background rather than going through it. Because going through this painful experience, because it's beautiful work as well, to go in the timeline and visit a past event and extract the learning and the teachings and, and shed some light and allowing that. That's beautiful as well. But if you have already in place a system that can do that for you in the background, so you don't have to worry about doing that. I like delegating. I like the idea of delegating those most awful tasks that are people that are in the spiritual path and in the self-discovery path and in the self-development path. They are struggling with, why would you spend so many years of your life working hard at something when you can actually create a system that does it for you? Because this is what we are, actually. And to me, this is what it is. We are a sum of patterns. We are a sum of programs. Physically speaking, we are patterns. Emotionally speaking, we are patterns. Intelligently speaking, we are patterns. Everything inside is a process and a pattern. So I think the most intelligent way to go about life is to acknowledge what patterns are working, like you were saying. Maybe you can clarify that again for us here. The awareness, becoming aware of what's happening, what process happens, when, and then create new patterns that will work for you to get to that stage where we are unconsciously competent, like we were saying in one of our past meetings with you and with Laura. So I think this is fantastic. I think this is when you are truly alive. This is when you're living. When you have set a system of patterns, a system of processes that work for you in the background. So what you do, you're just the captain of the ship deciding on the direction or where you're going. Sitting there confidently and enjoying the view.
And the ship's ticking over. The amazing thing to me is that these resources, these processes are simply waiting to be asked. They've been waiting all your life.
Absolutely.
To be asked.
Yes.
Right? They're certainly keeping you alive in the physiological sense, because part of them is also, regulating the heartbeats and the breathing, and all that's all part of the processes too, of course, at that level. But the actual conscious awareness of working with them has been waiting for some people centuries, for want of a better word. It feels like centuries. And sometimes you get a response, oh, at last you're paying attention, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And they're not like, it's not like they're resentful. They're just so pleased that they've actually been acknowledged and included as part of the conscious process of living.
Yes.
Because they're actually pre-installed.
But can you talk a little bit about the fifth step?
Well, the fifth step is what I call the energy systems of the body, which some people represent as something called chakras, the different areas where the energy seems to be focused in some way. Now, I never grew up with the chakra concept at all, although I've seen maps of it and things like that. But I've discovered that when you ask people to pay attention to certain areas of their body, where the chakras generally are drawn on maps, they do experience something that's a little different to other places, particularly when you ask the correct questions. What do you experience when you put your attention in that particular place? For some people it's a sensation, for some people they get an image of a color or whatever, it doesn't matter. Now, I just call them energy centers. But I'll use the word chakras if that suits that person's predisposed way of thinking about them. And I have no map of what color they need to be if they have a color. I've no map in my head of what sensations they need to have. I just elicit from that person what their representation is. Just like with the resources, I have no map of what a resource should present itself as in any way. I elicit from them their own representation. And I've noticed that in so many meditational practices, people are saying, now just imagine a peaceful place like a beach. And if the person doesn't like the beach, they've lost them. It's gone. The rapport's gone. Right? But and one lady with me who had this internal dialogue issue, she said, we went for 2 hours. She said, the first time I've been able to focus for 2 hours in my life. And so that's because we were going with you, with your representation. Because most people zone out as soon as you mismatch a person's representation. So with the chakras, it's the same. I invite the chakras to come, or those energy centers or whatever it is. And one person had no representation at all. So that's fine. That's your representation. Now that might change over time. I don't know. But she's still fully functional. And then I also make sure that the chakras, if they're not fully functional, because the person gets in, I feel a bit blocked there, or the colour's not as clear as I'd like it to be. So they have some representation not working quite as effective as it could be. So I invite the resources to go through the chakras. Start healing anything to do with the chakra issue, that chakra. Right. So the chakras are the energy centers and the resources and the timelines all get integrated.
All right.
In one holistic system, and the REM processing all gets in one big. So the fifth process is a integration process, everything we've covered up until then.
I'm not going to share what happened to me because, as you said, I want everybody, please, if you're curious about it and if you're going through some challenging times, Dika could help you going through this process. It's a beautiful process. And as I said, my experience with it, going through this, very, very challenging. I can't believe that I'm just a few weeks, 5, 6 weeks away from when it happened. And I can just talk about it as if I'm telling you that yesterday I went and had a coffee.
Went shopping, yeah.
Yeah, it's
and the thing is, the level of and depth that you worked at, for some people they'd be stuck there for 15 years if they didn't know how to process it, didn't have the support to process it.
So this is what I can say, that it's a wonderful experience. And the last session, despite the fact that I was not over yet with the current challenges, because it took us a couple of more sessions after to go through it completely, because he was connected with many other, nothing is like simple. Everything is a complex process and it has roots in many areas of your life. But despite the fact that it was not completely over, the last session was a very beautiful spiritual experience for me when we put all together. And I'm not going to say what, but I encourage you to try it with Dick. I'm planting a seed here. I'm programming your unconscious mind.
Yeah.
No, but truly, it's very hard. It's very hard for most of the people, and in the people that I work with, it's very hard to imagine that behind such a painful experience, you can actually see the clear blue sky. And the way it happened for me in regards to this particular challenge that I was going through was that one morning I just woke up light. This is how it happens. The way you imagine it, the way that you think it should happen, then one day and one moment something will happen and will shift. This is exactly how it happens. From heavy and heavy and heavy, one moment you wake up and it's gone. And remember, Dick, I was telling you, my mind keeps trying to go back there and try to feel bad about it, and it can't. This is when you know that it worked. You are completely different. Your perception is different. The feeling you have is different. You feel lighter. You feel happy. And your mind keeps saying, well, yeah, but that happened. How come you're not sad? How come you're not feeling pain anymore? And it tries to go feel it again, and it can't. This is when you know it's fixed. It's processed. It's digested. It's integrated. And then you feel empowered. Because you know that everything is a process. You know that that power is inside you. Sometimes you need external help. Sometimes you need a facilitator. Sometimes you need a kind soul and a pure heart like Dick's here, and to be there for you. But in essence, that power is within you, and it's not a metaphor. Or it is a metaphor, because everything is a metaphor. So
everything's a process.
One question I would like to ask you, Dick, before we wrap up and we say goodbye to our viewers. Have you tried this process on yourself? Have you gone through all these steps by yourself, or have you had somebody done it for you?
No, I did it all myself.
So you don't have the experience of it?
But not, well, absolutely.
In that sense, like the whole process.
But not in one go. In steps and bits and pieces on the way.
I mean, put together.
Well, that's not true. Well, that's not true either, because every time I take a person through the process, at some level I'm mirroring them and doing the same thing as well. So it's not quite the same as going into a full trance and just being there. But I've been in some amazing trances where I have, like, I mightn't do the whole 5 steps in one go, but I'll do, say, the timeline sometimes fully myself. Or I'll do the resort. I'll go and just have a chat to my resources and check them. And there's far more there now than there was when I started. So there's unlimited number of resources available in the universe. Now they're not all downloaded in us. That's necessary. But those 7 we start with are already in our system. We're built with them in us. We're born with them.
We're born with them.
But we're born with them because they're the resources that keep us alive.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They're the resources that gives our inert matter life. And that on the stages 2 and 3 of quantum healing down the track, we teach you to access any of the resources you want at all. There's no limit. There's unlimited number of resources in the universe. And some come from other people. Some come from elsewhere. So we teach you how to download and upload and all that sort of stuff as well.
And what have you gotten? What have you gotten from the experience that we had together at your personal level?
It's very humbling to watch people like yourself go through a pretty humbling in the sense that I'm part of something that if I hadn't been there, you may have had someone else, I don't know, but that I was the chosen one, for want of a better word, to take you through such a powerful process. And at the same time, it verifies that what I've over the years discovered and been led to discover and it led to bring to fruition actually works, even at the depths of that level. The depths of the soul, in some ways, goes right down there. And it also, as with your experience and some others, some more conscious than others, it actually realigns that the mind, the body, and the spirit. So you're consciously aware of the 3 elements working together. You're consciously aware of what the spirit is doing, what the body is doing, what the mind is doing in a harmonious, relationship. And that's available all day, every day if we want it.
Yes.
But
Yes.
most of us get distracted and go off and buy an ice cream.
Yes. And why is it important to you? I'm curious about that. Why is it important to you to deliver this, to be part of this, to facilitate this experience for others?
My sense is that's why I'm on the planet. Simple as that.
Yeah.
This is my last work.
All right. Any last word?
I can't say any more than that.
Can't say any more than
Sorry.
that. I was asking you if you had
That's
any
my last work.
last words to add to this.
There's just so much more in the later stages of the processes too. The quantum one is the setup, getting your system set up to work effectively, and you're consciously aware of that and working with it. And the other programs in quantum 2 and 3 is where you learn consciously to use all this to help make your outer life better as well as your inner life. How you work with this inner life to make the outer world for you a more easier place to negotiate. Yeah.
Well, maybe we will meet again and discuss about these steps, the next steps, quantum 2 and 3, like you said, right? Let's do that.
Yep. Good idea. Right. Good idea. Yep. Okay. Great idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dick, for your presence throughout these weeks in my experience, in my adventure, and thank you for accepting to do these interviews with me. And of course, we're going to talk again. I mean, it's not the last time. We have more to share and more to bring to our viewers and listeners. And of course, thank you all for watching, for liking, for subscribing. And of course, if you have something to say and you want to have a conversation with me here and spread your message, I think during these times that we're living, it's very important that we are connecting more and more with this inner power, and that we're learning more and more about the tools that we have and the resources that we have in order to stay sane and to make a living that makes sense to us. And if you want to do that, please contact me and let's talk. So to everybody, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all very soon.